Hello, everyone. This is Scott Hefner. I'm one of the Employee and Labor Relations folks, and I'm here today to provide information on the city's leave benefits. So if at any point you have questions about this information, you can certainly send me an email or give me a phone call and I'll be happy to answer those. But most of this is going to be high level information about the options that you have available. And that is really the point of this, is that when you have a need for leave, there are options available that you can exercise to take that time off for work. And so you'll see on the slide here, there are a couple of examples of why folks might need to take time off. This is not every reason, but you'll see that folks can take a vacation. You may wake up not feeling well enough to come into work one day. There might be a holiday, any of these types of things. And there are more items that you'll see in the next slide, but these are the probably the majority of the reasons why folks take time off from work. Okay, so the leave can be taken for all of these items, and these are the major categories of benefits that we have at the city. You may be joining us from a private sector employer where this is new and exciting to you, or you may be joining us from a public sector employer where this looks very normal, very common. This is, I would say, the normal smorgasbord of leave benefits that you would see in a public sector organization pretty much anywhere. And the last bullet you'll notice just says other, and that's because there are certain categories of leave that come up that we don't necessarily anticipate, or there's no major category for that type of leave. But we'll go through all of these types of leave, and hopefully you'll get a decent understanding how the city's leave benefits operate. Okay, for most of you, and when I say most of you, this is going to be anyone who is not in a public safety type of occupation. If you're not police, if you're not fire, then you're going to automatically be put into what we call the paid time off leave system. And that is a single bucket leave system where we record it separately. It can be scheduled, it could be unscheduled, but it all goes down as paid time off. And then there's this other voluntary benefit, personal critical leave bank, which you may choose to exercise if you'd like to. And I'll explain why that may be a good idea depending on your individual circumstances. So again, as we talked about earlier, it is a single bucket leave system. This has been the default system for non-public safety since October of 2000. So going on 21 years now that we've had paid time off as the standard for new employees at the city of Gainesville. You'll notice probably in your work area that there are still some folks on what we refer to as the designated leave system, which is vacation and sick leave. And that's because they're hired prior to October of 2000, and they elected not to transition to the paid time off leave system. But with each retirement and each separation of one of those employees, we're going to have a replacement of somebody that goes into the paid time off leave system, so that before too long, and I would say the next 3 to 5 years, all non-public safety employees are going to be on the paid time off leave system. So all of this is potentially discretionary, which is a big distinction between vacation and sick leave. As you're probably aware, sick leave cannot be used unless you're ill, injured, or disabled, and that makes it a non-discretionary type of leave benefit. Whereas in paid time off, if you're fortunate, if you don't have an illness and you are able to maximize the benefit, you can potentially use every hour that you earn and accrue for a discretionary purpose. So that is one of the major distinctions. We talked about it being scheduled or unscheduled. What I would encourage you to do is to go back to your home department and talk to your manager or department head and ask them for a copy of your leave guidelines. That will spell out exactly what the threshold is that changes a leave request from scheduled to unscheduled. And just to give you an example, in the human resources department, ours is fairly flexible, where up until 11:59 p.m., the day before you're supposed to go to work, you can have scheduled time off taken and it'll be approved as such. If it's 12 midnight or later, it's going to go down as unscheduled leave. And that's really a pretty flexible situation. Most of our city operations are shift oriented and some 24/7 operations. So in those cases, it's a little more disruptive to have somebody absent. So when they are absent, they may need to plug in overtime to fill that shift, or they may need to rearrange who is on a particular work crew in order to make sure the operation continues and there is that continuity. So in those shift operations, you'll probably find that the advance or lead time that you need to give notice about a particular vacation or any type of leave is going to be a little more significant. It may be, for example, 2 days prior to your scheduled shift, or maybe 2 full work shifts prior to the shift that you want to take off. And when it's maybe a week that you want to take a vacation, they may require that you give at least, say, 2 weeks notice. But that is different from department to department, which is why, again, I encourage you to go back and ask for a copy of your leave guidelines. That way, you know, in your mind, okay, this is what's going to change a scheduled incident versus an unscheduled incident. And not that there is a negative connotation with unscheduled, it's just a management tool so that if an individual has a number of unscheduled absences, the manager may need to speak with the individual and find out, hey, you know, is there an issue with the work schedule, or is there something else going on where we can make sure that you don't have additional unscheduled absences. That's really the purpose of it. And then the last bullet really is just advice. This is not a rule. This is Scott's advice, I guess, or anybody that's been here a while. We would encourage our community builders to manage their time wisely and be real responsible, particularly early in your career, if you can, to build up a little bit of a cushion of leave time so that in the event that you have to take time off, then it can be covered with paid leave rather than unpaid leave. And that's a very important goal. And I'll explain why that's so important a little bit later. But ultimately, if you can have that cushion, then you won't have to worry about going into a no pay status. All right, the slide that you're looking at right now, this is really important for those folks that are non-public safety. The alphabet soup at the top is really for the Amalgamated Transit Union, the Communications Workers of America Union, and our managers and professionals. That's what the letters mean at the top. That's the collective bargaining agreements or the group of employees and community builders that are covered by this table. So all of us in our first 5 years of service are going to accrue 6 hours and 10 minutes per pay period. And that at the end of a year is going to be 160 hours or 4 weeks of paid time off. That's what will accrue. And what you also notice is that with each 5-year interval of service with the city, you're going to accelerate the rate at which you accrue that leave so that by the time you're at 25 or more years, that 10 hours and 47 minutes amounts to 7 weeks or 280 hours of paid time off in a year, which is great. If somebody can use that amount of time and take vacation for 7 weeks, that's fantastic. Just know that that's what would be available to you at the end of your career potentially. And you'll run into a lot of folks that are in those categories because this is a fantastic employer. Folks tend to stick around for a good amount of time and spend their career here. So when they do, the reward is that they get additional leave with each of those 5-year increments of service. This table that you're looking at is what I would refer to as a soft carryover maximum. This is very different from the vacation and sick leave system, where if you don't spend your time down to that carryover maximum, you would truly forfeit those excess hours. That never happens under the paid time off leave system. That's an important distinction. So I would just let you know that in the event someone has more than 160 hours on their leave anniversary, and this is usually the day that you're hired with the city, that additional time will automatically be taken and put into a personal critical leave balance for you, where it's available if it's needed, and you can use it as incidents arise. But those hours would not evaporate. They wouldn't just go away. So just be aware of that, but also know what that number is so that if you don't want to have any excess hours, you can spend that time down to get below whatever the threshold is based on your years of service. Okay. So there is a quirk of the contract I would I would say with the CWA agreement, I'm not sure exactly why it is the way it is. I've been here for 10 years and I've done collective bargaining with this union over and over again. For some reason, this is just what's been agreed to. Anybody that's in a CWA, Communications Workers of America classification, they are going to be fronted 24 hours of paid time off right off the bat. That time can be used during the first 6 months of employment and nothing more. So in the event somebody needed, let's say, a fourth day off or a fifth day off, not the end of the world. That's okay. And you can work with your manager to get that time off, but it will be in a no pay status. Again, not entirely sure why it's done that way, but that is the way the contract is designed. So at the end of the 6 months, when somebody passes their probation, they become a regular status employee, those additional 58 hours that have been accruing in the background, they dump into the employee's leave balance and they're available and can be used as approval is obtained from the manager and plans are made to take that time off. So nothing is really lost by doing it the way the CWA agreement does it. It just means that those hours are sort of sequestered for the first 6 months. After 6 months, just know we're all in the same category. There's no distinction. We all earn 6 hours and 10 minutes. Your balance will grow and you can use that time as you get approval and make plans to take that time off. For everyone else in the Amalgamated Transit Union and our managers and professionals, it's really easy to understand. You're starting with zero and you earn those 6 hours and 10 minutes each pay period, and you can use that time as it's accrued and plans are made to take the time off. Again, after the 6 months, we're all doing the same thing, just accruing that time, and you'll see it in your leave balance. And that, by the way, for the CWA employees only applies to their initial probationary period. This is not going to be if someone gets promoted and has a new probationary period. We don't make any changes in those cases. It's only the first 6 months of employment. So what about this personal critical leave back? This is a sort of a vague or hard to understand thing for a lot of folks, but it's because it's a voluntary thing that you can put additional time away for a specified purpose, and you can use that time if you have an illness, injury, or disability. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it does sort of mirror sick leave. The only difference is that the first 16 hours of an absence have to be taken with PTO or leave without pay. And after you get to that 17th consecutive hour and beyond, you'll be able to access your personal critical leave hours if you have them available. And it's for one of those reasons, an illness, injury, or disability. And it can be used not just for you, but an immediate family member. Let's say that a parent needs to care for a child who's out of school due to the flu or something of that nature. They had to take them to medical appointments. If it's for that reason, they can use that time and draw down from personal critical leave, which is nice because it insulates and protects your paid time off balance. And even though I explained that paid time off is a single bucket leave system, we all want to use that time for a happy and fun purpose, and being sick is not a happy or fun purpose. So just be aware of that. Not going to be terribly important to be mindful of this during your first year of employment, let's say, but when you get to your second or third year and you start to have time that's bumping up against that carryover maximum, you may want to say, okay, I'll take and put some hours over into PCLB or allow those hours to roll into it. So how do you get that time into a PCLB account? Very easy. The most common, I would say, is that folks are just having excess leave on their anniversary. It's happened with me 9 out of my 10 years that I have more time than I'm able to carry over. And those excess hours on my anniversary just get scraped away and put into a PCLB account, and it grows and it's there and available for me. The other real common way is what we call recurring contributions. And that is an election that an employee makes during open enrollment that they designate 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours of their paid time off to go directly to PCLB as they accrue it. And it just builds like a savings account slowly and painlessly over time so that those hours are available as needed. And there's a reason that folks do the recurring contributions, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. The third way that folks get time into a personal critical leave bank is much less common, but it can be done at any time, where somebody just designates a set amount of their paid time off, let's say 20 hours, to go to PCLB, and they just go there, and that's part of the balance at that point. You may choose to do that, you may not, but that's an option that's available to you. The bolded and underlined bullet says accrues without limit. This is really important. So anybody that is thinking that they may want to have additional time set aside for one of these purposes, understand that unlike your paid time off, which on your anniversary cuts down to the carryover maximum, your PCLB hours can grow completely without limit. And I'll let you know, there is an employee that is working in the workforce right now. One of our community builders has in excess of 3,300 hours of this non-discretionary leave. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you save up 3,000 hours of excess leave, but just understand, if that individual has to go out, let's say they have an accident, they're hospitalized, they have recovery and recuperation, they're going to be out for a while. That person could potentially be out for more than a year and a half and never have to rely upon coworkers, AFLAC, any other type of income replacement, because they've had this time build up and it's set aside for that purpose. So just, again, be aware of this when you get to maybe your second year of service or third year, when you're starting to bump up against that carryover maximum, because then you may decide that, hey, I want to have some of these hours put away for this purpose. And it really is a short to long-term disability plan that doesn't cost a dime. It just means that you have decided to put those hours aside and have them available for this specified purpose. Know that when you separate service, there is no compensation, no pay for those PCLB hours. So if that factors into your decision, please, by all means, consider that and decide. If you don't want to have that happen, that's entirely up to you. But it is, again, very much like the insurance that you pay for on your automobile. The insurance company is not writing you a check when you change companies and go to a new insurer. It's just there for that purpose in case you need it. Okay. So enough about PCLB. Leave bank, this is a separate category, not to be confused with personal critical leave. This is available to all community builders, not just PTO participants. It is employee to employee donations, so that when you run out of time, an employee can donate their time to you if you qualify to have that time donated. And there are eligibility criteria built in. It allows you to receive up to 464 hours of other folks' time if you're out due to illness, injury, disability, and you've exhausted all of your leave and you qualify. So that 464 hours is just a hair less than the 12 weeks that the Family Medical Leave Act would entitle you to. And it's designed intentionally that way, so that someone who maximizes it and gets full contributions in that amount, they could potentially be out an additional 12 weeks in a full pay status using other folks' time. So how do you get to have leave bank eligibility? The three ways are listed here. If you're making those recurring contributions to your personal critical leave balance, you're automatically eligible to receive donated leave. Even if you have almost no hours on the books when you initially go out, it doesn't matter. As long as you're making a 1 hour contribution to PCLB on a biweekly basis, you're going to be eligible to receive these leave bank donations. You'll have to get through your initial probationary period to access this regardless. So keep that in mind. But once you get past that, if you're making those recurring contributions, you are going to be eligible for it. The other way to become eligible is to have a minimum balance of time on the books when you initially go out due to this extended absence. And that can be a combination of paid time off and or PCLB. And it is based on a threshold that should look familiar to you when we go to the next slide. The last bullet is kind of important. Number 3. It's that our managers and professionals and our public safety sworn folks are already eligible by virtue of being in those employment categories. And all they have to do is complete their initial probationary period. So they're not required to maintain a minimum balance, and they're not required to make recurring contributions to PCLB. So keep that in mind. If you're not in one of those categories, if you're under the Amalgamated Transit Union contract or one of the Communications Workers of America contracts, you will need to have eligibility by virtue of meeting numbers 1 or 2 on this slide. So this is the table that I was talking about. In order to be eligible, if you're not making those recurring contributions and you're in the ATU or the CWA collective bargaining units, you will have to have a minimum balance on the books when you initially go out, and it should look identical to what you saw earlier, because it is equal to your carryover maximum. It's designed intentionally so that it's easy to remember, but just know, based on your years of service, you're going to have, you'll have to have at least 160 hours on the books if you're in your first 5 years in order to be eligible. So that's why a lot of folks choose to do the recurring contributions, the 1 hour per pay period, for example, because it's pretty painless and it automatically makes you eligible to receive a leave bank donation. Folks that do the recurring contributions sometimes decide to cut it off, and you do this only during open enrollment, so that in the event you cut it off in October of a given year, it'll stop coming out of your leave balance or your paid time off accruals January of the following year. And that's the way it works, is on a plan year or calendar year basis. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Again, if you're in a MAPS position or public safety, you're not held to the threshold on this table. Okay, so this is a happy slide for me. This is a way to add additional cash to your total compensation each year, and it is selling back some of that paid time off that you've accrued. In order to do that, you're going to have to meet an eligibility of having at least 220 hours of combined leave that can be paid time off and PCLB. The only requirement is that you have at least the number of paid time off hours that you are seeking to sell back. So think of someone having, let's say, 60 hours of paid time off and 160 hours of personal critical leave. They'll be eligible and they can sell up to 40 hours any one time during each fiscal year. And that election can be made at any time. You can decide when to time it, whether you want to have extra spending money for the holidays or for vacation. You can time it to coincide with that, so you have that extra cash. And it's a nice way to convert yourself from a 52-week employee to a 53-week employee, and it is paid at your current rate of pay when you make that election. So just keep that in mind also if that's something that's of interest to you. Okay, so that is it for the paid time off leave system. I'll circle back to it and give you a little bit more detail at the end, but I want to now focus on our public safety folks. This is for our police and firefighters who are in a sworn capacity. They are default put into the vacation and sick leave system, which we call the designated leave system. They're going to accrue hours in vacation separately from hours in sick leave, and each one is used for its intended purpose. So we can't use sick leave for vacation. It has to be for illness, injury, or disability. So that is why some folks choose to transition to the paid time off leave system, because it gives you more flexibility. But if they choose not to, that's also fine. And this is what the folks will stay on for the duration of their career. Right now, the police officers do have the option of electing to transition to paid time off. Firefighters do not. That's just the way the collective bargaining agreements are written and what's been agreed to. So keep that in mind if you're in one of those two categories. So again, we talked about it being designated in two different buckets, and you use it based on the need of the day. You can use sick leave immediately as it's earned and the need arises. You will not be able to use vacation immediately. And it is different for police versus fire. Police can't use vacation for the first 6 months of employment, and firefighters can't use vacation for the initial 12 months of employment. Not tied to probation, it's just time, 6 months and 12 months. And if vacation is not used, and I talked about this earlier, you lose or forfeit any hours that are in excess of the carryover maximum. Very different from paid time off, where you don't have to sweat it so much, and you'll know that excess hours will automatically be dumped into a personal critical leave balance for you. If you're in a sworn capacity and you for whatever reason are not able to spend that time down to the carryover maximum, those hours are truly forfeited and gone forever, which is, again, one of those reasons why folks may choose to go to the paid time off leave system. And if somebody uses all their sick leave and they're still out for one of those reasons, illness, injury, disability, that's okay. They can draw down their vacation leave in lieu of sick leave to stay in a paid status for that purpose. All right, so this slide is going to be geared entirely toward our police officers. The letters at the top, the FOP stands for our Fraternal Order of Police and our Police Benevolent Association. Those are the two collective bargaining units that cover our sworn officers in the officer, corporal, sergeant, and lieutenant ranks. Those folks are going to accrue 80 hours of vacation in a year, and their carryover maximum initially is going to be set at 180 hours. After the first 5 years of service, the carryover maximum ratchets up to 240 hours, and it stays there forever for the duration of the career. And you'll see that the rate of accrual for vacation starts to accelerate as time goes by, but it is capped at 176 hours after 25 or more years of service. It never gets as high as paid time off accrual, not even close actually. But again, it's because paid time off is designed as a single bucket leave system where everything is drawn down from that one bucket, regardless of the need of the day. All right, so how about sick leave for our police officers? They are going to accrue 48 hours initially for their first 2 years of service, and then you see it goes up to 72 hours. And then after 4 years, they're going to be at 96 hours, and that's what they'll accrue for the duration of their career thereafter. That's the way it's set. And for all of these thresholds and numbers, I would caution you that this is all collectively bargained, and it is sometimes policy driven. So changes can be made. It can always be bargained and agreed to, but I would say it is reasonable to expect that these numbers are going to be in place for the duration of your career. And I say that because they've been stable throughout my career and folks that came before me. None of this has changed. Not to say that it can't change, but it is really stable. And again, I think it's reasonable to plan as if this will be in place for your entire career. All right, so how about our firefighters? They are covered by the International Association of Firefighters Collective Bargaining Agreements, and they likewise have a different set of accruals based on years of service. It's not too different from what you would see for police officers for the 40-hour folks. But remember, with our firefighters, they do 24 hours on, 48 hours off, and that averages 52 hours per week throughout the year, which is why they have a different rate of accrual. For a firefighter to take a day off for vacation, for example, it's going to cost them 24 hours because they work more hours. They're on the clock longer than the average community builder. So that's why the accrual in the second column or the third column is going to be significantly higher than our 40-hour staff. And there aren't too many folks that are in a 40-hour capacity at fire rescue. Most of our folks are working shifts and they're assigned to stations, and they'll be on the 52-hour accrual rate. So our firefighters, their vacation accrual, you'll see, is going to be different depending on their status, whether they're a 40-hour employee or a 52-hour employee. And again, these folks are working 24 hours on, 48 hours off if they're in a shift capacity, which is why you see the 52-hour column. For those folks, their accrual is going to be significantly higher, and it's because to take a day off, they're going to have to use 24 hours of time. Their accrual is going to be 120 hours initially, and then it ratchets up, obviously, as time goes by. That's the reward for continued service. And at the 20 or more years of service, you're going to see that they're getting 240 hours of vacation accrual per year. So how about the carryover maximums? These are also set depending on whether the employee is in a 40-hour capacity or a 52-hour shift capacity. And they will have a higher carryover maximum based on years of service, starting at 292 hours for our shift employees. And it goes up to 460 hours if they have 20 or more years of service. And just like police, I will caution you that any hours that are not spent down to that carryover maximum on your anniversary, they will be truly forfeited and gone forever. They're not coming back to you. Sick leave, IAFF, our firefighters are going to earn a standard 144 hours of sick leave per year, and that is from day one until the end of their career. So that one should be pretty easy to recall. All right, so that's it for the vacation and sick leave system and the paid time off leave system. A little bit different in how that time is accrued and utilized. So be aware of that, particularly if you're if you're a police officer and you have the option of starting in one designated leave system and electing to go to paid time off. That's something to really compare and contrast and see if you have a preference for one or the other. For everyone else, it's a default based on your employment category or your collective bargaining agreement, and that's where you will fit. So these other leave benefits, they apply to everyone. So everyone needs to tune in and be aware of these things. These are pretty important. Bereavement leave is at the top, and that is a little bit different from most leave benefits because it is defined on a workday basis. We work different shift lengths. We have folks that work 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. Our patrol officers work 12 hours a day. So we're not going to have someone come back in at the end of bereavement hours mid-shift when they're not able to be fully present and give everything they can to the job. If they're in a state of grieving, they need to use that full workday. So the rule of thumb is up to 3 work days in connection with the death or the memorial service for a loved one, and that family member is defined in both policy and contract. It is the normal immediate family member plus one removed, like a grandparent, for example, that we might think of, but definitely consult the contract or the policy so that you know what those family relations are and what is covered and what's not covered. It doesn't have to be used all at once. And to give you an example, some folks may use one day, the day that they get news that a loved one passed away, and they might save 2 days for the memorial service because let's say it's out of state. We all may have out of state or sometimes overseas relatives that are covered by this, and we may need to split it up so that we're able to use that time appropriately. That is up to the individual, and they would just communicate with their manager based on the circumstance. So the next one is domestic/sexual violence leave. This is a tough one. This is something that's statutory driven, but if someone is a victim of one of these things, they are able to use up to 3 work days in a rolling 12-month period in order to attend to whatever they need to attend to that is connected to being a victim of one of these things. And as an example, a community builder may choose to register their children at a new school. They may choose to hunt for an apartment or lease an apartment, meet with an attorney, follow up at a doctor's appointment, whatever is connected to that situation, they can use the time for that purpose. Now, this, unlike bereavement leave, this is actually the employee's own time. So it might be paid time off or vacation, or it might be leave without pay, but just know that you're entitled to that time up to 3 work days in any 12-month period. And I'll go back to bereavement leave real quickly, just to note that you're eligible for that today, and there is no lifetime or career limit on the number of instances where you can use bereavement leave. So that's important to note. We don't make folks wait in order to access that leave. It's important that folks have the opportunity to go through the grieving process, and that's why it's designed that way. All right. So leave bank, we actually did talk about leave bank. And if you have questions about that, again, you can email me or call me, but it is where an individual can receive donations from coworkers up to 464 hours to extend their absence if it is connected to illness, injury, or disability. Military leave is also statutory driven. So this is going to be up to 240 hours per year, and that's a calendar year, for weekend and annual training, and up to the first 30 days of any active duty employment is going to be in a full pay status with the city. After that, it's just a leave of absence, and the military is going to pay the employee anyway. If for some reason the community builder is making less through the military than they would in base pay from the city, we will make up that difference, and that's what we call supplemental pay. Whatever the difference is, that's something that would flow through payroll and you would get that compensation. The next one's a pretty big deal, the Family and Medical Leave Act. So this was signed into law in 1993. We've got 28 years of time working with this law. We're a covered employer. We are a compulsory participant in family medical leave. And what this is after someone has 12 months of service, they've worked for us for a year and they've logged at least 1,250 hours of service with the city, which is about 7 months for a full-time employee, they will evermore be entitled to family medical leave benefits, which is up to 12 work weeks in a calendar year for an illness, injury, disability that is defined as a serious health condition. So what is a serious health condition? I don't make that determination. The employee's manager doesn't make that determination. That is made by our employee health services, professional healthcare staff. They receive documentation from the treating physician, and they will certify that circumstance as being covered by family medical leave benefits. And the leave designation simply says that the employee is designated approved, and it'll give their leave parameters. As an example, it might say that the employee is expected to be out on continuous leave for 6 weeks. Whatever the parameters are, they'll specify that so that the manager knows the time that the employee is going to be away. They don't get information about the diagnosis or prognosis. They only are communicated about the leave parameters and whether somebody is approved under the Family Medical Leave Act. This time may be paid, it may be unpaid. So I'll just let you know, the standard policy at the city is that we draw down any accrued leave, vacation, sick, PTO, personal critical leave bank. We draw down that leave until it's exhausted before you go into a no pay status. Once you're in a no pay status, we would still, if it's within that 12-week entitlement under the Family Medical Leave Act, we'll give you that job protected leave so that you have your job to come back to, but it will just be categorized as leave without pay circumstance. So keep that in mind. Again, 1 year, 1,250 hours is the eligibility criteria to get that benefit. And then the last statement there or category is our paid parental leave. This is a really big deal. The city adopted in 2017, actually it was November 2nd, 2017, a paid parental leave provision that grants up to 12 work weeks in a full pay status for a community builder who has a qualifying event, and that event can be birth of a child, adoption of a child, or placement of a foster child. Any of those qualifying events, immediately upon that event, for up to 12 work weeks, the community builder can choose to bond with the child and be away from work so that they don't have to worry about juggling, coming into work and daycare and that sort of thing. And it is in a full pay status. So this is a league leading benefit. When we did the survey to find out what other municipalities and counties and districts were doing, no one offered a full 12 weeks in a full pay status the way the city has adopted the policy, but that's the way it is. And it is in policy in every one of our collective bargaining agreements. So every community builder who is eligible for this is going to be able to take advantage of this if they have a qualifying event. So how do you qualify initially? I'll let you know. You have to have worked for us for 1 year and you have to have logged 1,250 hours of service. If that sounds like Family and Medical Leave Act criteria, it's because it is. It was designed intentionally that way so that it would be easy to understand and folks would qualify at the same time for both FMLA benefits and paid parental leave benefits. So on paid parental leave, it's up to 3 times in a career. It's the way it's written. So I would express again that you can plan as if that'll be stable for the balance of your career. It can always be tinkered with and modified, but it's been stable for the almost 4 years that we've had it in place so far. So that is really everything that we have on just a high level view of our leave benefits. There are going to be questions. It's natural. Circumstances don't always neatly fit into one of these categories. And that's why you have your management structure, your department head, human resources to contact and get feedback on what sort of benefit am I entitled to. for a particular circumstance. And we'll be happy to analyze that situation and give you the best advice that we possibly can. So if there are any questions after all of this, certainly let me know. Give me a phone call, send me an email, and I will do my best to get you a good answer. That is everything for our leave benefits. The last thing that I want to say to you, and this is very important to me, is I want to welcome you to the city. You have chosen a fantastic employer. I joined this organization 10 years ago. I plan to be here until the end of my career. Best employer I've ever worked for, and I'm happy that you chose to join our team. I want to welcome you and just say I hope to meet with you in person someday. And if you do meet with me in person, ask me a leave question. I'll be happy to answer that. So thank you and have a great career.